Hi, everybody. It's Pastor Lillard from Emmanuel. Hope you're well and enjoying the weather. Easter is a season because we're Easter people, and the message of Christ and Him risen is always something in play for our lives. But most of all, Easter is a season in the church because when Jesus rose from the dead, He came and He probably expected some of His devotees to be around, but they weren't. So He went looking for them. And he goes and sees them, and then Thomas isn't there, and then he sees Thomas. And the gospel for this Sunday is from the gospel according to St. John, the 20th chapter, and the first 19 verses, I believe. And this is where Jesus is on the shore, and the disciples are in a boat. And the story goes as they were getting, had no luck. They had no fish. And most of them did this for a living. And so they were probably a little chapped, a little bit hot under the collar. And Jesus, I just always love his style. He just kind of says, "Well, how's everything going? How are the fish biting?" And they're like, they're not biting at all. Being a golfer and not an angler. So if you're on the eighth hole and every single hole has water, and you've hit 2 or 3 balls into the water in every hole, and then somebody comes by and says, "Hey, how's your round of golf?" Like, thanks for asking. However, for whatever reason, they just listened to this guy when he said, "Well, how about try fishing on the other side of the boat?" And they're like, "Well, okay." And then they did, and then all of a sudden they just had all these fish. And that's when the disciple John looked at Peter and said, I think Jesus is behind this, because that's what he does, is that he takes a little boy's lunch and feeds 5,000 people. And he takes water and turns it into wine, and Lazarus was dead. It's Jesus. And all of a sudden they have an epiphany and they realize that it's Jesus, which my mind is full of questions. It's like, well, if you know someone and you see that person at Publix, you don't have to like wonder. Maybe Jesus had a baseball cap on. I don't know. But anyway, they come to shore, and then Jesus says, "Hey, you want to have some food, maybe some fish, because I helped you catch some fish." Then they go have some victuals. And here's the point I always say, is that whenever Jesus is involved, it's not just hanging out. It's just not talking about, the weather or talking about sports or the economy. He looks at Peter and says, "Do you love me?" And Peter says, "Well, I love you. And do you love me more than you love these guys?" He goes, "Yeah." "Are you sure?" And Peter says, "Yes." And there's just this kind of little, uh, not debate, but he's calling him on the carpet to make sure that he is worthy of a calling that he's about to receive. So there's your teaser. I'm not going to tell you everything. You got to come to worship. So come to worship and hear about a call and a bunch of questions to Peter. But my guess is I'm going to probably make sure that you realize that Jesus does the same to you and to me. In the meantime, be well. God bless.
Hello, this is Pastor Rick. I want to welcome you to the Lectionary Plus. I want to thank Pastor Lillard for that devotion this morning. And now we want to take a look for our texts in preparation for worship on May the 4th. And this is the tradition in the Easter season. We often have now a text from John, or then and a text from Acts. So not an Old Testament reading, and that's what we have today. Now, our text from John 21 is really quite fascinating. And commentators talk about this as having 2 epilogues in John. The first is the end of John 20, where we read, "Now Jesus did many other signs that are not written down in this book, but these are written down so that we might have faith." That sounds like, right, the end of the book. And then this text for this week is added. So many consider it a second epilogue. And I'd say, well, it's a Fisher story, which is interesting because John, unlike the other synoptics, doesn't have all those great fishing texts and stories from Galilee. And so it's almost as if John is adding this text at the end to bring that theme together. Because in the synoptics, when we talk about fishing, we remember the song from our Sunday school, Jesus will make you a fisher of men. So the symbol of fishing is always linked with discipleship and evangelism. And so you feel like John is adding this at the end to connect with those stories from the other synoptics. That's first. But second, we think about Luke 5. It's hard not to think about Luke 5, where Jesus asked the disciples, To push out into the deep. And you feel that link with that story because now, after the resurrection, of course, the disciples will be soon by themselves and they're going to have to push out into the deep. Jesus will not be in the boat with them. And thirdly, notice it's Peter. And it says that after the catch of fish, they come and they gather around the fire with Jesus and they're going to cook up some wonderful tilapia, whatever it is. And the last time Peter gathered around a fire, he was outside of Caiaphas's home, denying Jesus 3 times. And so the writer John now has him around the fire. Well, he's going to have to answer to Jesus 3 times about whether he loves Jesus. And so these 2 stories are linked. The fire outside of Caiaphas, Peter's 3 times denial, the fire here on Lake Galilee, where Jesus then asks him 3 times, will you love me? Finally, this whole theme of abundance, right? Jesus not only provides breakfast, but a lot of fish. And John loves to talk about that in Jesus, God gives us abundant life. So that's the first text. It's a beautiful one here at the end of John. But the second is from Acts 9, 1-6, or we can continue 7-20. 2 stories. One, it's about Saul getting knocked off his horse near Damascus. As we know, he sees the light, he hears the voice. Why are you persecuting me, Saul? Saul goes, who is it? So we have this whole conversion where Saul now is going to become Paul. That's up through 6. But then the second story is now Saul, who will become Paul, can't talk. And so in a vision, Jesus appears to Ananias in the house of Judas in Damascus and says, I want you to go and visit this guy, Saul, and pray for him and heal him, give him his sight back. And so he does that, but Ananias knows, I've heard about this guy. He's persecuted our group here. He's persecuted Christians. He's even killed them. What are you doing? What is this vision? And so we have both of these stories together, which are remarkable. Again, the conversion of Saul, but also how will the Christian community embrace Paul? How will they embrace this guy who he caused a lot of trouble? And now will they take him into the community? So these are wonderful texts for this Easter season, and we'll see what's lifted up on Sunday morning. Thanks for joining us for Lectionary Plus. Bye-bye now.